What's up guys, I'm Derek Cardwell, your host for this channel where entrepreneurs like yourself come to learn to build, inspire, and innovate. Let's get to it. All right guys, I am super excited for today's tutorial because we are going to be diving into CSS Grid, and this is going to be a great project for if you are looking to create a portfolio or just something to show future employers or friends or family. Just a cool website. I am personally going to build it so that I can link to a few of my web applications. And yeah, it's a great project to show off your work. So let's go ahead and get started and create just the markup here for the HTML. And right now in the body, I'm going to go ahead and create a header. And within that header, I'm going to create an H1. Here, I'm going to do H1 and call this logo and put my name in there. I know that this isn't really a logo, but it's my name. It's close enough. So we got the P tag. I'm gonna do a paragraph tag after that. Hold on. Let's go ahead and give this a class of cell number, and go ahead and put my cell number. And wait a minute, I don't really want you guys prank calling me, so I'm just gonna make up a fake one. And now we can go on and enter in an email. And let's put in my actual email. I'm cool if you guys email me. Email me if you have questions for sure. That's what this is all about, right? So we got that. Now let's go ahead and save this file and see if anything pops up on the screen. Looks like, see on the right here, it should be popping up there. So we got something wrong. Let's go live. Still nothing. Okay, there it is. So we can see our data right there showing up on the screen. And we got the header, and after the header, let's go ahead and create some main content. And I'm going to give this just a class of main content. And within that, I'm going to go ahead and create another div and give this an ID of about me. And I'm going to make this an ID. Oops, looks like I accidentally called that a class. Yeah, so instead of class, I'm going to make this an ID as well. And so yeah, within this about me. Oops. There we go. So within this about me, let's go ahead and I'm going to create another div and call this one about me content. And within about me content, another div, and we're going to call this one text. And within that text, I'm going to create an H2 with a heading or a class heading. And then within that class heading, let's make this strong. I'm gonna do this right here. I'm gonna put in about me, and let's save this and see what comes up here. So we got about me showing up, and after that, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna create a class called paragraph, and I think we can just put that right underneath the heading here. So I got a heading, and let's do a div called paragraph. And basically within this paragraph, what we're going to do is, I don't really need a class for that, but we're going to put, I'm going to open up my LinkedIn here and grab just like the about me section so that I can use this to show people. Let's grab all of that and go ahead and throw that in our paragraph tag. Awesome. And then after the paragraph tag, let's go ahead and what do we want to do after this? I'm going to throw in an image. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to throw in an image, and that image is going to be outside of this paragraph, or sorry, not paragraph text, the text class. So you can see right here, I've got this class text, And since the image is not text, we're going to add a separate div, and we're going to give this a class of image. And then within this class, put in an image tag. And since we don't have the folder yet that contains the images that I want to use, I'm just going to go ahead and put an alt for a placeholder here. So I'm just going to call it profile image. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. So underneath this about me section right here, see we got the div tag about me. Underneath this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a section called skills. So right here, I can go ahead and create a div and call this, let's call it skills container. And within skills container, we can create another div and call this skills. And now let's go ahead and list out the skills. So I got JavaScript, and I've got CSS skills, and we got HTML skills, and let's see, got Rails. Rails was actually the first framework I learned, which was awesome. And then after Rails, we can throw in React here. And after React, let's throw in GraphQL. And if you guys haven't heard of GraphQL, it is amazing. I'll do another tutorial on that in the near future. Definitely check it out. It's basically what they are claiming to be the alternative to REST APIs, a better solution. And of course, Node.js. So now that I got the skills section right here, you can see here's the closing div tag. The next section I want to create is projects. And in this section, this is really where we're going to start seeing a lot of the CSS grid design is right here. And so what I'm planning on doing is having sort of a, like down here, different quadrants. So I'm going to do this project section and do this first div. Let's go ahead and give it a class of project square, because I'm going to be making these little squares, and each square will be clickable, and it'll take you straight to like a web application, a link to a web application that I built. So of course, to make that clickable, let's go ahead and create an A tag. And for the href, I actually have links already set up for different web apps I've built. So I'm going to go ahead and put in different links. Yep, that one looks good. And I'm going to give that a class. I'm going to call this the golf square class, just because it's my golfing app. Oops, looks like I had a little typo here. Golf for life. And yeah, so that's going to be, so what we're going to do is wrap this A tag around a div. And I'm going to call this like just the square content. And within the square content, what I'm going to have is, it'll be kind of like if you can visualize a card, right? So I'm going to have an image, and with this image, or after the image, I'm going to have like just a paragraph, just some text in there. And you know what? Let's actually give this paragraph a name here. Let's call this, I'm going to call it center text. And let's see, just to put some text in here, I'm going to go ahead and give a little description of what I did with this app. Fairly simple app, just to keep track of your golf scores. I got tired of hearing everyone in the office bragging about their best score each week, so I figured, hey, let's create an app and just let the app brag for them. So that's kind of how that idea got started. But anyways, we'll go up to the image here, and I'm going to go ahead and give this image I'm going to give it a class. And let's go ahead and call it like logo golf. Because what I'm actually going to do is just create some logos and use that in a second. You'll see here in a second. So yeah, it's looking good. We got just for safety, let's go ahead and put in some alt text here, just in case the image doesn't load. All right. So after that A tag, let's go ahead and create another link. And let's give this one a class of, I'm going to put like a recipe app that I built here. So I'm going to call it recipe square. Oops. Whoa. Recipe square. And yep. Let's go ahead and put in the URL for this app. Awesome. And we got the class there. It looks like it's going on to the next line, probably. There we go. Okay, that looks better. Okay, so same thing within this A tag. We're gonna wrap this A tag around div, which will contain both an image and a paragraph. Same type of format. So let's go ahead and type that out. So I'm gonna give this div just the same class of square content. And within square content, we can go ahead and give an image with the class of, let's see, I'm going to call this just logo recipe. Yeah. All right. And so, yeah, so this image is logo golf, and then we got this one down here called logo recipe. And as you can see, I got the classes kind of mixed up around here. So I'm just to keep everything congruent, I'm going to keep it all the same and put the class at the end, the last attribute. And right here in the alt, we can go ahead and just throw in like recipe app in case the image doesn't load. Whoa, what did I just do? Okay, cool. All right, so that's looking good for the recipe app. And then of course, after the image, we're gonna go ahead and add in just like a paragraph, and let's give this the same class of center text. And I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of describe this for a second. Cool. All right, so that's all looking good. And I've got, let's see, let's go ahead and go to the next app that I've done. So again, just another A tag here. And, oh, actually I wanted to give this a class. So let's just go like this, A dot, we did the recipe. I did a study group app, which was kind of cool in college. So let's just go ahead and call this study square. Oops. Oh boy. And the href for this is https ://pactola.hero. All right. So yeah, so within this A tag, you guessed it, we're going to do just the same thing, another div. And we're going to go ahead and give it just the same class here. Oops, you don't need to say class of square content. And within that, we're going to do an image. And let's go ahead and give This one would be a good name for this. Got recipe square, golf square, so you just do study square. Oh wait, actually, you know what? Study square, that is what that's the class name we gave to the A tag. So logo, yeah. So with image, we want to do logo, just to keep everything congruent. So logo and study. And for the alt, we can go ahead and throw in here the text of Pactola app, since I called it Pactola. And after the image, write another p tag and just the same thing of center text, so that we can get our styling right after here. Oh boy, what did I do? Yes, center, there we go, text. All right, cool. And so now I'm gonna go ahead and in this p tag, I'm gonna throw in some text that just describes what this app did. Okay, so that's looking good. We got the image, the p tag, and this is all wrapped within an anchor tag. So let's go ahead, and I've got another anchor tag here. And I'm going to give this one just the class of, and so this next app was just like a chat app that I built. So I'm going to call it Chat Square. And the href for this one is HTTPS Explorer Chat. Yeah, that should be right. All right. And again, within that, we're going to do the div, and this, and as usual, it's just like the div is going to have square content. And within that, we can go ahead and put our image, and I'm going to call this logo chat. And since we don't have the source yet, or we don't have that folder yet, I can go ahead and put in the alt. Let's do that. Great. And of course, we got the p tag after that, so it's just the same thing, center text here. And I'm going to throw in the text of this chat app was built using Firebase and Vue. And now I've got one more that I wanted to put in here. And last but not least, it was a philosophy app I built for a philosophy class. So let's go ahead and add in this anchor tag with, with a philosophy square. And the href for this one is https colon / what was it? Tundra. Hopefully I'm getting these right here. Not the best naming of URLs going on. So okay, I can fix that stuff later. All right. And yeah, within this a tag, we're going to go ahead and do another div and square content and throw an image there. And we're going to do this logo philosophy now. And no source yet, so go ahead and put in just an alt of philosophy app. Cool. And then of course the p tag. And in here, I'm going to do center text again. And just throw in a little bit of text here. So let's see. This is a true story. Instead of writing a paper, I requested that I code a project, and they probably aren't very used to that happening in philosophy. But quite frankly, there's a lot of similarities that since I majored in philosophy, I noticed there's a lot of similarities with philosophy and programming, and one of them is that they both are very logic intensive. So just some food for thought. If you ever want to major in philosophy, it's not completely useless. Okay, so now that we have all the markup in place, let's go ahead and start adding the style. And this is where CSS Grid comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and add in, right in the header, or the head tag, excuse me, I'm going to add in a style tag. And within this style tag, I'm going to go ahead and address the body. And in body, let's go ahead and set a margin of 0 pixels. And I'm going to use a font family called Workspace, or sorry, not Workspace, Work Sans. And I'm going to use a font size of 22 pixels. And of course, in order to use Work Sans, we got to import it up here. It's a Google font library. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and throw in this link, and it's going to have an href of https://fonts.googleapis.com/css !family equals work sans. Okay, so now if I save this, we should see a difference on the screen. Yep, there we go. So over here on the right, you can see the font's a different style, and it's looking much, much nicer. So underneath the body tag, I'm going to address the heading class, or the heading, yeah, right here. So heading class, and I'm going to include the H2 elements in that. Oops, heading. Jeez, can't spell today. Heading. Cool. And in here, let's go ahead and give it a font style of bold and save that. And after that, we can go ahead and add another heading class here. And in here, I'm going to do a font. Actually, no, not font style. I'm going to go ahead and do a display of grid. So this is where CSS Grid comes in. So after this heading H2 selector, we're going to add the selector of header. Oops. And in this header, we're going to go ahead and give it a display of grid. And this is where CSS Grid comes in. So if you remember down here, we gave this element, this div right here, a class of header. And what we're doing is we're selecting that header, and we are going to give it an attribute of display grid. And that allows us to use CSS Grid in this element. So the way that CSS Grid works is we can define columns and rows. So right here, first I'm going to start off with defining the columns, and to do that we just type in grid template columns. And this is why it's so cool, because I can go here and say 50%, so meaning the first column will be 50%, and then 25% and 25%. So if you can imagine right here on the display, this first column that's 50% will take up 50% of the space, and then we'll have two more columns to the right of that take up 25%. So 50% and then 25 and 25, and it adds up to 100%. So after we've defined the columns, we can go ahead and you actually don't need to define rows. That is what is called an implicit grid with CSS Grid, and the implicit grid automatically adds in rows as you go. There are a few occasions where you'll want to add in or define rows to force different behaviors, but in this case we really just need to stick with the columns. So let's continue on. Now that we have the columns, I'm going to give the top, this is just going back to normal CSS now, this is nothing particular to CSS Grid. So I'm going to give the top 0 pixels, and I'm going to give a background color of, let's see here, you know what, I'm going to do RGBA. I'm just looking at my notes over here. I have a certain color that I am using and that I like. So go. Okay, so this will give the background a really nice, slick looking color here. So what this background color is going to do is it's going to give it a nice clean white background, and this 0.95 is a transparency. So what I want to do is over here on the right, when I scroll up, I want this header to be fixed so that the main content as I scroll, it scrolls and you can kind of see it fade behind the background here, behind this header. So you'll see what I'm talking about here when we set this position. We're going to do that to fixed. And I'm going to do a width of, let's do 100%, and a box shadow. I'm going to set this to none. Okay, so if we go ahead and save this, we'll be able to see, yep, over here on the right, you can see as I scroll up, you can see a little bit of the text fading or visible behind this transparent background on the header. So the next thing I want to do is I actually want to select the header again, and I want to select all the P tags within that header, and I want to give it a different font size. So I'm going to set this to 15 pixels, save that, and that put my cell number and my email address at a little bit smaller of a font, which I like. And you can see up here in the top right, both the cell and the email, it's stuck on the top right corner of this header section. So I don't like that. I actually want to bring it down here a little bit. So let's go over to the style and let's select the cell number. And let's go ahead and give this a property called justify self and give that center. So this is CSS Grid. Justify, it's kind of one of these things you have to just memorize, but justify means it's going to move it left to right, and then if you want to go top to bottom, it's an attribute called align. So justify self center, if we save this, you can see it moved the cell over to the center, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here with the email. So let's go ahead and select the email, and I'm going to give this email, I'm going to do align self. So this is top to bottom like I was talking about, and so instead of going left to right, it's going to push it down a little bit. Yep, so you can see there. So now let's go back up to the cell number and just do the same thing. We'll throw in an align self property and make that center. There we go. So it's centered both top to bottom and left to right. So just to give you a better idea of what we just did, I'm going to go ahead and make this left side a little bit smaller and make the right side of the screen bigger, and so we can inspect it. And if I go up here and kind of scroll across this header segment, you can see CSS Grid taking action. So we got the 50% column here, and then 25% and 25%. And of course we got the cell number placed right in the middle. So it's justify center left to right, and then it's align center top to bottom. And then the email, we just did align center. I didn't do justify center because it just doesn't really need it. It looks fine how it is. So the next thing we can do now is I'm just going to make this left side a little bit bigger again. Underneath the email, I'm going to go ahead and select a logo. And remember, logo is my name. And with logo, we can do margin left of 10%, just so we get some spacing on that left side and it's not going right up next to the screen. And why is that not working? Oh, spelt it wrong. Margin. Cool. Save. So you see it moved my name over to the right. And it gave it 10% padding right here on the left. And we could have done something like that with CSS Grid, but I personally like to use CSS Grid for just overall layout, and then to make minor adjustments, use traditional CSS, margin spacing and whatnot. But sometimes I'll find myself, creating a little extra column here to give it some spacing as well. But it's entirely up to you how you want to approach, solving those problems. So what I'm going to do to just keep this a little bit more organized is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go ahead and throw in this this comment, and let's make this the header section. And then under here, we can add another section called main content. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and dive into the main content, and I'm going to create just a main content ID, or we're going to address the ID of main content because we already put it in here. Yep, there it is, ID of main content. And in this ID, let's go ahead and do display grid. So we're going to make this another grid. And in this, for the rows, let's do grid template rows. And this is a really cool feature right here about CSS Grid, is you can use repeat. And the repeat method is where you put in the amount of times you want to repeat the column and then the width of the column. And so with CSS Grid, what you can do is just do one fraction, and that'll make sure that each fraction as you go across the grid columns is the same. So it's just one fraction across the entire grid. And let's go ahead and save that. Okay, so you can see when we saved it, it kind of had an adjustment here. So we got the profile first, and then we have the skills below it. And remember, with the main content ID, we also created another div with the ID of about me. So let's go ahead and style this about me section. So right here we got about me, and then within this about me we have about me content. Right, so down here, here's the about me content. And with this about me content, I'm just going to give it a margin top of 150 pixels. Okay, so you can see that kind of pushed things down just a little bit, and it's still cut off here. We're going to fix this in a second. But after margin top, I'm going to go to display and make this a grid as well. And for this grid, we're going to give it grid template columns. And this is another cool thing about CSS Grid, is I can go here and say 10% on each side. So I'm going to do 10% on the left side, and then I'm going to give it 2 equal fraction spaces, and then 10% on the right side. Right? So we have 4 columns here. The first column is 10% of the overall width of the screen, and then we're going to have 2 fractions in here filling up the middle section, and then on the right side 10%, and that'll give us a nice so you can see the about me, it placed it right in that first 10%. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to go to this about me div, and we're going to have to place it into that middle section, which we will do here in just a second. But first, before we do that, I'm going to give this section a margin bottom, and let's do 40 pixels and see how that looks. I think that's going to turn out okay with the 40 pixel margin bottom. And then after this, we can go ahead and let's select the text element. And with this text element, now with the text element, remember that it is, see, if you look down here, we have this div with the class of text, and it is nested inside of the div called about me content. And so what we're doing here is we're going to tell CSS Grid which space we want this element called text to occupy of the grid space in about me content. So if that didn't make sense, I'll just go ahead and type it out here so you can see it. And the way we do it is we say grid column, and with that grid column, we're going to say it starts at line 2 and ends at line 3. And what do I mean by line 2 and line 3? Well, let's just go over here and inspect our web page. Hold on, let me save this first. So, so you can see it's already looking a little bit better here, but let's go ahead and inspect. And if we go here, we can see the grid. And by line, what it's really saying is this right here on the far left, this right here is line 1. And then when you go over to the right here, this is line 2, and then line 3, line 4, you get the idea. So what we're saying is, okay, we want this text paragraph right here, or we want this text element right here to fill up the spaces between line 2 and line 3. So right here we got line 2 and line 3, and it did exactly that. We've got the text right where we want it. Now what's so cool about all the CSS Grid stuff is we can start to nest even further. So I can take this text element right here, or I guess it's right here, and then we see inside of this div we have more elements. And so what I'm going to do is make this text element also a grid. So we can go here and just say display as grid. And save that. And since heading, the H2 element of heading is inside of what we have now defined as a grid, we can go here in the style section and just go ahead and select the heading element. And in this heading element, we can say grid, column, and I want it to take up the spaces between lines 2 and 3. Save that. Now you can see something interesting is happening here. We have the text taking up this column, and we have the About Me heading taking up the column next to it. And when they're both, you can see right here, they're both defined to take up grid column 2 through 3, which they are nested in the About Me content. So it should be taking up the same space. Well, what's going on is one element is kicking the other one out and placing it next to it. So you'll see how we fix this here in just a second. But first, let's go down here and select the image. And we're going to place the image in grid column 3 through 4. Okay. And we're also going to make this image a grid. And the reason why we're going to make this image class a grid is because in here we have an image element, and I want to use the align self center on that, and in order to do so I need to define this as display grid. Normally I think people would use flexbox, but since we're just keeping everything CSS Grid, that's what we're going to do here. So now that we have the image defined, we're going to go ahead and select the profile image, which is nested in the image. And I'm going to do align self. And let's give it a width of, we'll say 70%. All right, so now I have my photos imported here. So I created a new directory called photos. And I went ahead and I added also some logos that I created for my apps that we'll be using here in a second. But the image that I'm wanting to use right now is this one right here, the profile-image JPEG. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to that image, wherever it is. Here it is. And in the source, I'm going to type dot to signify that it's the same directory, and then we're going to go into the photos directory, and then we are going to say profile image dot JPEG. Okay, so when I save, it should show a huge image of my wife and me. Let's see. Yep, so here we are, and we're going to fix that styling in a second as well. So let's go down to, here we are. So profile image width is 70%. So now what I'm going to do is select my paragraph element with the class of paragraph. And in this, I'm going to do grid column 2 through 3. And all that's doing is it's going down to the paragraph right here. And I'm just saying I want this grid, or I want I want this element to take up columns 2 through 3 in its parent div right here, text. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a line height of 1.6. Okay. So now I want to get into a little bit of the color theory and what colors I've decided to use for this project. And there's a really, really cool source that I want to show you. And it's this one right here. I'll go ahead and paste this URL in the description to this video. But what I can do is I can find a color that I like. So I went ahead and I chose this color right here. And what's so cool about it is it goes down here and it shows you the complementary color. So color theory, it's a totally different course, outside of this video. I'm not a color theorist, or it's not my specialty, but this site is super handy if you just want to know how to make a good looking site and use the colors you want, but make sure it's really catchy and top notch. So you can see here there's the triad. So if you didn't want to just use the complementary color right here, you could use these three, and it's going to look great with these three colors as well. But for our purposes, I just went ahead and I chose to just do a 2-color format. So we're going to use this color along with this complementary color down here, kind of a orangish color with a blue color. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this color picker into our project here. So first I'm going to select the H1, and I'm going to give it a color of, right here, oops, looks like it pasted twice. Great. All right, so let's see how that looks. All right, yep, there it is. Our H1 element has that nice color right there. And just so we can see how this color looks with the other blue, I'm going to go ahead and skip down to our project styling right now. So let's go ahead and select our projects ID, and let's this is going to go across the entire grid. So remember how up here we went ahead and we did this repeat 12 columns. Each column is in one fraction. So remember, we're going to start at line 1 and we're going to end at not line 12 but line 13. That's key right there. A lot of people get confused with counting lines and whatnot. So it's important to remember that we're not ending at line 12, but we're actually ending at line 13. So I'm going to go down here, and the idea is I want a project section to take up the entire width of the screen. So I can go ahead and define that right here. So grid column, and I want this to be lines 1 through 13. Okay, and I'm also going to make this element a grid. So display grid, and in that grid, we aren't going to do the 12 columns like we did for the entire layout of the page, but what we can do is we're going to go grid, template, columns, 15%, and then this is the next feature that I wanted to show about CSS Grid is what you can do is, we've already seen how it can get complicated counting lines and whatnot. So this is a really cool feature is you can actually name the line. So I'm going to call this square start, because we're going to be using squares, and then one fraction in between that line, and then I'm going to use another line called square end. And after that line, I'm going to just go ahead and give it 15% padding on the right to match the 15% on the left, and save that. And actually, before we do anything else, I want to go down here and define a grid gap. And we haven't talked about grid gap yet, but what grid gap does is it gives it spacing between each line. So the columns in this projects section of our page there's going to be let's see, 1, 2, 3 columns, and each column is going to have 20 pixels in between. And last but not least, let's go ahead and add that complementary background color, which is why we went ahead and skipped to this section. And let's see, what was that color? Go down here. Here it is. Click there. I'm going to highlight this. I don't know why it's pasting 2 of them each time I do that. And save that. And you know what? There's actually some problems going on with our page here. So I need to take a peek here for just one second. I'll pause the video and be right back. All right, I think I know what's going on here. So we defined a profile image class selector. The only problem is if you go down here to our actual image, there is no class called profile image. So let's go ahead and add that in. And let's see, how did we spell it up here? Profile-image-img. And let's save that. Much better. So our image has gone down in size, and as you can see, we're still having trouble pulling up that blue color. So let me pause one more time and see what we can do here. And of course, the problem is just another typo. So right here, we define this as an ID of projects, but if you go down to our actual projects, it is not an ID, it is a class. So let's go ahead and change that to ID and see what kind of difference that makes. Okay. All right. So we're seeing the blue now, and that's good. So yeah, we're hoping to get this blue to look great with this orange right here. So within this project's ID right here, this entire width is going to be blue. But what I want to do is I want to create another a subdivision in here, and I'm going to call that project square. And in this little subdivision, we'll have multiple little CS Grid tiles right in this area so that people can click and see our projects. So let's go ahead and go up to that the styling again, and we're going to add our projects square. And in this project square, we are going to have it start, so grid column start, and we're going to have it start at this really cool spot right here where we named this line, it's square start, so we did a good job naming it there. So square start. And then we want the grid column to end at, you guessed it, square end. Cool. So now if we go ahead and inspect our page, let's go ahead and inspect it so we can just make sure that everything's okay and that there is actually a CSS grid right here. So you see right here, we got projects, and then we have our 15% column right here, and then we have right here is our one fraction, and then 15%. So it's lining up right here with our defined columns, and then of course we've got the grid gap of 20 pixels right here. So now we have our grid square taking up this entire project section, but the problem is we still actually need to display it as a grid and define what this individual square is going to be. So let's go ahead and go back to our project square, and I'm also going to give this some gapping. So we'll do this 20 pixels, and of course we need to make this a display grid. So again, we're nesting a grid inside of another grid, and grid template columns, and I'm going to do a repeat, and I'm going to repeat 8 times with one fraction. So we're going to have 8 fractionated columns in there. And then right here, I'm just going to go ahead and define rows just to be safe. I don't think you always have to do this, but I'm just going to make auto. Like I mentioned before, there's an implicit and an explicit grid with CSS Grid, and if you don't define rows, it's going to implicitly give you new rows each time it needs it. So I'm going to go down here and put auto anyways, and then margin top is going to be 20 pixels, and I'm going to give it a margin bottom of 20 pixels as well, just to get some spacing in there. And I'm going to hit save, and you know, it is still not doing anything, so I think there must be a problem in here. Let's just go ahead and check our spelling. Project square, let's see here. Yeah. Yep, so we misspelled it. It's projects square, not project square. And go ahead and save that. And you can see right away there are different adjustments that are happening right off the bat, and we will come back and address these in just a second. But if we scroll down here, yes, that's looking much better. So you can see here, you know, we've got, if we go back up to our styling just so we can see what's going on, right? So we got the 15% in this projects on each side, and then within that, and then we defined, right, this line right here, we defined it as square start, and then this whole thing is that fraction, and then square end. So this is our square that we're working with, and then within that, we went ahead and we did this repeat columns right here, and gave it, you know, some auto rows. But most importantly for right now, you can see we have grid column start, and then it starts at the right spot at square start, and then square end. So if you go down into this project square down here, you can see we've got some p tag elements. So I'm going to go ahead and style those p tags right now. So right here, I am going to call projects square and also the p tags. And I'm just going to give it a font size. And let's give it a font size of 16 pixels. All right, cool. So that made it much smaller, and this is looking a lot better. Okay, so now this is when it gets kind of fun right here. So what we're going to do is now we're going to call that golf's square, or we're going to address it by calling its class right here and golf square. And I'm going to say this is going to take up the grid column. Oh, shoot. Between lines 1 and 6. So you can see as soon as I save that, it does. It takes up between columns 1 and 6. And remember that golf square right here is, if we go down here, where is it at? Golf square. So it's nested inside of this project square, which if we go up here, we see that project square we also gave a display of grid. And we, you know, remember we did repeat 8 times 1 fraction. So what's happening is there's these lines repeating right here. And then we're saying, okay, project square, or sorry, golf square, we want you to take up lines 1 through 6 right here. And just so that we can kind of better see that, let's go ahead and give it a background color. I'm going to make that white. There it is. So see, we can see that entire column is taken up. The grid column is being defined between lines 1 and 6. So now let's go to the recipe square, and we can just go right below this golf square. And in that recipe square, I wanted to take up grid column 6 through 9. The lines 6 through 9. And you see right away, recipe app, it's taking up lines 6 through 9. And I'm also going to give this a background color. And let's make that white. And look at this. You can see how there's blue right in between these two white columns. That is the grid gap taking place, the 20 pixel grid gap. Okay, so now let's go down and just do the same thing with the chat square. So chat square. And I'm going to give this one grid column, let's go 6 through 9. And let's see what's going on here. Okay, and you can see right here, we have the Explorer app. This chat app was built using Firebase and Vue. Good. So it is taking up the 6 through 9 columns. And now, if we look over here, I want this study square to take up those other columns. So let's go ahead and address that. I'm going to go here to the study square. And in the study square, let's go ahead and make it do, you know what, I actually want the study square to go the full width of the box here. And so I'm going to say 1 through 9. Oh, and I see right here I have a little typo. Needs to be grid column 1 through 9. And there we go. See, it's taken up the entire width. And oh wow, you can see Explorer app got pushed down here. So we have a couple problems that we're going to address here in a second. So let me just finish this off, and I'm going to go down and give this a background color. And we're also going to make this white again. And so really what's happened here is CSS Grid with the implicit track went ahead and made a new row. And so it it pushed this Explorer app down and the chat app down. So I'm going to go here and give this a background color just so we can see it. And because it's the styling we want, give that a background color white. And there it is. So really the last app that I wanted to put on my page was the philosophy square. And this philosophy square, I wanted to take up, let's just say grid column 3 through 9. So and there it has completely taken over. There it is. Okay, so grid column 3 through 9, and I'm gonna go ahead and make this a background color again, of course, of white. And you're probably wondering why I'm doing this grid column 3 through 9 and why we have study square or chat square 6 through 9. And what I want to do is I want the philosophy square to take up the space. So let's move this Explorer app over and have it fill up this space right here. So instead of 6 through 9, we can do something like 1 through 3. And awesome. Fits right in here like a glove, and I think this is starting to look pretty nice. We've got a nice little grid layout, and this, it's cool because this is very obvious that we've been building with CSS Grid, and if we were to be using just like padding and tons of nested divs and bootstrap and whatnot, I mean, this just starts becoming so complicated. But with CSS Grid, we can just say we want a cool looking style, and let's go ahead and place each div element right in there, and you can see how powerful this really gets when we start nesting those grid elements. So the next thing that I'm wanting to do is I don't like the way these A tags are looking right here, so I'm gonna restyle that, and let's go ahead and give it a text decoration of none. Save that. Okay, cool. That gets rid of that underlining, and then just to make it a nice color, we'll give it black. Cool. So now we have this entire div. You can see when I hover over, my cursor becomes a clickable cursor. So if I go ahead and just like click here, boom, it takes us straight to my Golf for Life app where I can go ahead and, not to get on a tangent, I'll just show you real quick. So let's say we're playing Old Mill and I want to add a score. So 3, 2, 2, 4, 3, or 2, 3, whatever my round is, and add the round. And it's kind of a cool little app. Maybe I'll do another tutorial on how to build something like this in the near future. But let's go back to CSS Grid, what we're really working on. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pause the video because I want to create some logos. So instead of just having text here, I think it'd be really nice to get some design in, make a logo so it's more obvious that this is a square that we're wanting the user to click on. So give me just 1 second to create those logos and we'll just get right back to it. Okay, so I've gone ahead, I've created those logos, and as you can see here, I already had some names put in here. So the PNG, I had some files created. So let's go ahead and add those in now that I've got those styled how I want. So let's see here. In this source, I'm going to go ahead and say the current directory of photos. And I'm going to go down, and this is the golf one. So you can see right here I named it. Where is it at? Golf for Life. So let's go ahead here. All right, and I'm going to hit save, and boom, you can see right here I've got my logo. Okay, so if we go over here to the recipe app one, right here, let's go ahead and put in that source. So current directory of photos, and this one is called recipe app logo. Save that. Cool. We got the logo there, and you can see we're going to have to fix some styling. And then let's go down to this one, and let's do, this is the, the study group one. So current directory of photos. oops, instead of just study group app, I hit save. It's actually study group app logo. Now we can hit save. And we can see that logo in there. And you know, it's like, again, it's the sizing's all kind of different. So we'll address that in the styling in just a second. And now let's go to this next one. This is the chat one. So in the same directory, photos. And we're going to do chat app logo. .png. Save that. There it is. And last but not least, let's go down here and let's put in the philosophy app. So current directory of photos, and there we go. Save that. And boom, we got some nice logos in there. Now we just need to do a little bit of styling. Okay, so now if you remember, in each of these little grid squares right here in the p tag element, we put a class in here, and you can see it right here. It's called center text. And what we're going to do now is we're going to use that class up here in the styles. And within this center text class, we're going to go ahead and give it a margin left of auto and a margin right of auto, and we're going to give it a width of 75%. Save that. And you can see right here what the auto margins did was it automatically put in a margin on both the left and right so that it would fit in with the width of 75% for the text right here. So the next thing we're going to do is find the class name skills that we gave to an element down here. And remember, it contains all of my skills, and we can see right here it's just floating up here to the right. So now let's go ahead and style that. So just go up here. And what I want to do is I actually want these skills to take up the grid, and I want it to go just right above where my app section is right here. So I'm going to go ahead and select skills right here, and I'm going to give it grid column. I want it to take up grid columns 2 through 3, and I want it to do this. I'm going to make this a grid as well. So I'm going to give it columns within its own grid here, and I'm going to do 7. So let's do repeat 7 fractions. And what I want to do is I want every item in each column, I want it to be justified to the center. So instead of doing like justify self, what you can do here is you can say justify items, so it selects all of the items within this grid, and then I can tell it to center. And things are getting pretty crazy here, so hold on, let me pause 1 second and see what's going on. Okay, so it looks like going down here to our skills div tag, it's going to be right up here. So here it is. So yeah, so in this div tag right here that we've called skills, it's actually wrapped with skills container. So we need to actually put some styling on that class as well. So while we're here, I just want to give it the background color that I like. So background color. Remember, this is the color that we found on that website. And see, it's up here. So now is when we need to style that wrapper. So skills container. And I'm also going to give this a background color of the same. So this one right here. And then along with the background color, we want this to take up grid columns 1 through 13. So I want this, since it's the container, I want it to go all the way across the grid. And then of course this is going to be display grid because it is a nested grid, a grid within a grid. And we're going to do grid template columns. And what I want is I want there to be a little margin on the left and right. So we're going to do 10% and then one fraction to take up the space in between and then 10%. So we'll save that. And yes, that is way better. So here we are. We've got our skills in its nice little nested grid area. So if we go here and inspect, we can see it's got each little grid section right here. And then it's got the space on both sides here, that 10% that we defined. So now if we go down here, you'll remember we declared a class called square content in this. See, where is it at? Here it is, square content. So each div has this square content class. So we're going to use that to style each one of these squares. As you can tell, it's not really ideal right now. So let's go up here. And I'm going to select square content. And I'm going to do a display of grid. And I'm going to give it grid template columns. Whoa. Of just one fraction. So let's scroll down here real quick to take a look at what we're doing. So down here you can see this div square content. It has the image and the paragraph. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to select this image and paragraph so that we can style within each square content. So now that we've made that its own separate grid, we can go up here and select, let's go ahead and start with the golf one. So logo golf is what I believe we named it, that class. And I'm going to give this a justify self of center and save that. And then I'm also going to just give it a width of only 30%. So you can see it's much smaller and it's nice and centered, and that's the look that we want right there. So what I'm going to do is, since each class has the same structure, let's just go ahead and copy and paste. And instead of logo golf, we had this one called logo recipe, and then this one down here, which was logo philosophy and study and chat right there. Okay, and so now let's go ahead and adjust these sizes. So for logo golf, we have 30%. For the recipe one, I'm going to go ahead and try 50%. I think that should probably do the trick. And that looks pretty good. And let's do logo philosophy. Let's try 60%. For this one, you know, I actually want it a little bit smaller. That's too big. Let's do 40%. Okay, that looks better. And for logo study, let's do, I think 30% should be pretty good for that one. And logo chat, 30% was too small. So because you can see right here, it's just way too small. So let's go ahead and bump it up to 70 and see how that looks. Okay, cool. Way, way better. Okay, so that looks pretty good for our squares down here. Obviously, we've got a little bit of spacing we need to fix down there in a second. But I want to look at this About Me section just because it's definitely not, you know, how we're wanting it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go down here to see what's going on. And okay, so I have the About Me section selected, but it's really selecting this class right here, About Me content. So we still need to style just the About Me section. So let's go ahead and do that. And within this About Me, I want to give it that background color that complements the blue that we did for our H1 right here. And it is, where is it? It must be down here somewhere. There it is. So let's go ahead and select that color, and then we can put it right here. And then along with that background, we really want this to take up the entire grid. So let's go ahead and do grid column 1 through 13. Okay, we're getting places. So that's looking a lot better, but there is still some styling we need to fix right here. We can see the image is hugging up too close to the text right here. And then of course there's just this huge spacing right here and all this white space that we just need to get rid of. And you know what? I think really it should not have this much spacing. That makes me think that there is a bug. So let me just make sure everything's set up down here. Oh, right here. That is not supposed to be rows. That is supposed to be columns. Save that and see what it does there. Okay, wow, way better. We we got rid of all that crazy spacing, and everything just fits in exactly how it should. So that's a good lesson to learn right here: is do not use rows on accident. Use columns. It's going to make everything way less confusing, and it's what you're supposed to do. So you'll use rows sometimes, like I mentioned, but yeah, columns is where we want to focus. So to fix this image right here, the spacing, let's go ahead and go down, and we're going to put an inline style on this image right here. So here it is. And right after the alt, let's go ahead and throw in this inline style. And make it justified self to the center. And that's looking much better. So this is looking pretty good. Just really the last step we have is we need to make our site responsive. As you can see, if I were to make this super narrow, so let's make it really narrow, it's definitely not ideal here. So we got a little teeny tiny image and all this text, and you can see there's all sorts of problems down here. And yeah, it's just overflowing into this header section. So that's what we're going to work on right now. All right, so now we are going to go ahead and just inspect this and see how it's looking on an iPad. So if we go up to here and select, let's do iPad Pro. It looks pretty decent on iPad Pro, so I'm going to select just the iPad. And you can see it gets a little bit, I think the image is a little bit small right here. So let's make some adjustments so that we have text and then image. So let's go ahead and check that out. So we are going to want to go back up to our style tag, and right below here, I'm going to go ahead and put in a comment just so that we know we're working with the iPad styling. And okay, that looks good. Now what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to add a media query. So I'm just going to go ahead and say media, and this is only screen, and right here we're going to say a max width of 1023 pixels and a min width of 768 pixels. And so basically anything we put in between here is going to only be affected by screens between these widths right here. So let's go back, and I should not have exited this. Let's go back and take a peek one more time at what's happening here. Okay. So I think we need to put just a little bit more margin on top in the About Me section. In the content part. And let's say margin top of, let's do 150. Okay. And I'm going to make this a display grid as well. And for the columns, let's do 10%, 1 fraction, and 10%. Okay, so you can see now that we've saved, so it's put in the grid here. You can see there's 10% here, and then the text is taking up that 1 fraction, and then 10% here where the photo is, and we're going to actually move the photo down below here. So let's go on to do margin bottom. of 40 pixels. And I'm going to go here, and now let's go ahead and select the image. And we're going to say we want this image to take up grid columns 2 through 3, between lines 2 through 3. So grid column 2 through 3. And you can see right away as we save that, it puts it on between lines 2 through 3. And since this is taking up the first row, the implicit grid automatically pushes our photo down here to the second row. So yeah, that is looking pretty good. But I see right here there's a problem with the skills. It's cutting off some of our skills, so we're going to want to go ahead and make it so that it adds on to the second line below here. So let's go ahead and select our skills and say we want it grid, taking up grid columns from line 2 through 3. And we're going to also do a display grid. And this grid will have grid template columns and repeat 4 times. Each time is 1 fraction. Looks like I forgot a semicolon here. Oh, and it also looks like I forgot right here the little quote. There we go. So you can see when I save, it creates a new implicit row right here. So yeah, that's the iPad, which looks good to me. And now let's go ahead and check out what the iPhone X looks like. This is sometimes a tricky one. Oh yeah, we got some work to do here. So I am going to add a new media query, and before I do that, I'm going to add another comment just so we know it's the iPhone X. And in this, we're going to do the media, only screen, and max width. Now this time it's going to be 767 pixels, and the min width of 375 pixels. Now obviously the About Me section, we've got some work to do on that again. So let's go ahead and select the About Me section. And the content in that section. And I'm going to give it a margin top of 150 pixels. And I'm going to make it a display grid. And in that grid, again, we'll do 10%, 1 fraction, and 10%. So you can see here's all the text and then our little photo right there. And then we'll do a margin bottom of 40 pixels. And let's see here. Now we got to work with that image, so let's go ahead, select the image. And with that image selected, we can say it's going to take up grid column from line 2 through 3. And sure enough, it throws in there below. Now let's go down here and see how the skills are looking, and yep, that's not going to work, so let's go ahead and fix that. So we got skills, and we're going to say it's going to take up grid column from line 1 to 3. Okay, that's already looking a little bit better. Awesome. And I want to make this also a display of grid. And I'm going to do 4 times 1 fraction. Okay, and another thing that sticks out to me is this H1 is way too big, so let's go ahead and fix that. And I'm going to make the font size 25 pixels. Okay, that's way better. And with that, I want this paragraph to also be smaller, so I'm going to go down here and say within the header class, select the p tag, and we're going to make this p tag a font size of 14 pixels. Okay, that makes it a little bit smaller. And now I'm going to just select the header, and I'm going to do a display of grid because I want to make this header a grid here. And then, let's see, the columns, 40, let's do 40%, 30%, and 30%. So we can see up here the cell number is not looking too hot, so let's go ahead and fix that. I'm going to select the cell number. And with the cell number, I'm going to have it take up grid column 2 from lines 2 through line 4. Okay, cool. And you can see there it is, isolated up there. And I'm going to say grid row 1 through 2. And the reason why I'm doing that is just to lock it in place. It'll come in handy in the future here in a second probably. And then justify self is start. So do you see with justify self, as soon as I hit save, it moved it back over. So let's go ahead and do this again. So delete that, save it. There it is in the center. And then if I hit save with the justify self start, it moves it over to the start of that column. So it moves it closer over here. Okay, now let's go ahead and check the email. Fix the email, and I'm going to do grid column 2 through 4. And let's do grid row 1 through 2. Okay, so now you can see where the grid row comes into play. It kind of forces it into the same section right here. Instead of having the implicit grid create a new section below, it forces it to be in the same spot. So yeah, this doesn't look ideal, but we're going to fix that here. And I'm going to say align self. I'm going to have it end. So as soon as I save that, it went ahead and it pushed it to the bottom. Remember, align is top to bottom and justify is left to right. Okay, so now let's go ahead and look at this about me section. We definitely need to do some work here. The text is way too big and stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and select the ID about me. Okay, and I'm going to give the margin top 100 pixels. Okay, so it just moved the title up closer so there wasn't so much gap and space there. And I want to adjust the H2, so I'm going to go ahead and do another About Me selection with H2, and I'm going to say font size is 100%. Okay, so you can see it made it a little bit smaller right there. And you know what? Let's it looks like we took off a little bit too much space here, so I'm going to go ahead and make this 90. Oops. Oh, I mean, sorry, not 90, 110. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, of course, the paragraph is way too big, so we're going to just do the same thing we did here and instead select the paragraph. So just go over here to the paragraph, and let's see, I want to make the font size, let's see how this looks. 15 pixel. Okay, much better. Now let's go ahead and go down to our projects here, and we're going to select the ID projects. And you can see down here, see it's definitely not looking too great. So I think it'd be nice to just keep it one square all the way down instead of doing this fancy like 2 different columns per row. So each row will just be 1 column. So to do that, we select the projects and then say grid, template, columns. And I'm going to do just a 1% just because the screen size is so small. And remember our cool little square start, line naming, and then 1 fraction, and then we're going to do square end and another 1%. There we go. Okay, that's already looking way better. So, I mean, really we could kind of keep that same layout, but I just think it would look better to have 1 column for each row going down here. So we will eventually get to that, but first I want to make some adjustments here with the skills. So if we go to skills, and I'm going to select the H4 elements there. Oh, okay. And in here we can go ahead and give it a font size of 12 pixels, which would be a little more appropriate for the size of the screen here. Okay, and that looks pretty good. So now we can go down here and select, let's just select skills, and I'm going to do grid column 2 through 4, and you can see it shifted it over to make it look a little bit better there. Okay, so let's just kind of see how things are looking. I think I want to make a H1 with the margin bottom. Pixels. Okay, that just kind of, I don't know if you noticed, but it wasn't completely even right there, so that makes it look a lot cleaner. Now we can go down here, and first I'm going to select the chat square now that we're working on my project section. So go down here to chat square, and where is it? Right here, because you can see it's not working out that way. So let's do chat square, grid column 1 through 9. And so what this is going to do is it's going to make it take up that entire column right there. So I think that's the solution we're going to take here. So now we can do the same thing, go to philosophy, and with this one just say grid column, just the same thing. You can just copy and paste this to make it go quicker. And then we have the golf square. Same thing. And we've got the recipe square. Let's see how it looks. Yep. So that's looking way, way better. I like it. Looks great. So now the next obvious thing that you are probably noticing is the logos are all over the place with their sizing. So let's go ahead and fix that. So I'm just going to go here and I'm going to select logo golf, and I'm going to make logo golf. Let's see. Yeah, justify self center just to make sure it stays in the center, and then I'm going to give it a width of 40% to make it smaller. Okay, so that looks a lot better, and we can do the same thing. It's going to be a similar format, so I'm just going to copy and paste. We're going to do one for study, chat, and philosophy. So logo study, and then we got philosophy, and we got chat. Golf, study, philosophy, chat. So for the study, I'm going to say 70%, and let's see how that looks. Okay, that's better. It looks bigger. And then for the philosophy, I'm going to say 70% as well. Because if I remember right, it was kind of small. Yeah, so save that, and that looks a lot better too. And for the logo chat, 40 is probably pretty close, but I'll just do 50 just to make it a little bit bigger there. Yeah, that's looking good. So now that we have this looking pretty good, the only problem is if we go over and we select the iPhone 5, it gets all crazy. And that's because I just realized if we go up here, I set the min width at 375, but really if you look here, it needs to be 320 so that it grabs the iPhone 5. And if we save this, that should look much, much better, and we are set. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on CSS Grid. it's not really in depth on CSS Grid. It was more just a overall working project and just kind of a build along. If you want to learn more in depth CSS Grid, I'm going to be putting out some tutorials on that here in the near future, so stay tuned. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe, and we'll keep you up to date on the latest and greatest. So thanks again, guys. This was a blast making this website and portfolio to showcase all your apps, and go ahead and show it to all your friends. We'll see you next time.